Tomorrow was my formal presentation to the pack. But my mother forced me to hide my true scent and take the place of my dead twin sister, Celeste, to fulfill a mating contract with the Supreme Alpha. It's only right she gets to experience the glory of being a Luna through you, my mother had said smoothly. Because my soul did not match the name on the registry, the Alpha's marking bite caused a violent, agonizing physical rejection. As my blood boiled and my body slowly died, my family did absolutely nothing to save me. My father and brother only cared about the pack's political alliance, enabling my mother's twisted madness. She had even secretly built an underground cell lined with toxic silver right next to my sister's grave. She wanted to chain me in the dark, letting the deadly metal slowly burn my flesh until I died beside her favorite child. Until my last agonizing breath, I didn't understand. Why did she look at me like a murderer just because I survived the accident that took Celeste's life? Why was my entire family so willing to bury me alive just to comfort a ghost? Opening my eyes again, the moon goddess had pulled me back through time. I was back in the stormy week before my 18th birthday. This time, I will not be a sacrifice, and the supreme white wolf inside me will tear their lies to shreds. Chapter 1. Seraphina, POV. The moon goddess had pulled me back through time, right to the stormy week before my 18th birthday. I gasped for air, my hands flying to my neck. My skin was smooth. There were no jagged teeth marks, no burning venom, no tearing pain of a rejected marking. I was alive. The attic's timber frame groaned under the weight of the downpour. A damp, musty air, smelling of wet earth and rot, seeped through the warped window sash, and the drumming of water on the tin roof was a dull, percussive echo of the bone tapping from the first ritual. Tomorrow was my formal presentation to the pack, the first of the ceremonies leading up to my actual birthday and the shift. In my past life, I had died a horrific death because of that ceremony. My mother had forced me to hide my true scent and take the place of my dead twin sister, Celeste, to mate with an alpha. An alpha is the absolute ruler of a pack, and his bite is meant for his true soulmate. Because my soul did not match the name on the contract, his marking bite caused a severe physical rejection that slowly killed me. It took 3 days. 3 days of my blood boiling in my veins while my family watched, silent and complicit. The wooden door of my attic room creaked open. A young Omega maid rushed in, her thin clothes soaked from the rain. Omegas were the lowest ranking members of our pack, forced to do all the menial labor. She kept her head bowed, trembling as she spoke to me. "Miss Seraphina," she stammered, her voice a thread of sound. "Your mother, she's taken it. She took the moonstone amulet your grandmother left for your ceremony." My chest seized. A spasm clenched deep in my throat, and I had to grind my molars together to swallow the hot, metallic-tasting air that threatened to erupt from my lungs. My inner wolf was already awake, pacing restlessly in my mind. I remembered what happened when I was 10 years old. Celeste had fallen into the old silver mine lake and drowned. Silver is the most deadly substance to our kind, capable of burning our flesh and poisoning our blood beyond healing. Ever since that day, my mother, Alara, looked at me as if I were a rogue wolf who had stolen her favorite child's life. I took my dark cloak from its hook and moved past the shivering maid, without a word. I stepped out of the ancient castle and walked directly into the dangerous, rain-swept forest. I knew exactly where my mother was going. The pack cemetery was located halfway up the mountain, surrounded by towering pine trees. The smell of wet dirt and decaying leaves filled my nose. Through the thick curtain of rain, I saw a flickering lantern illuminating a white marble headstone. My mother crouched in the mud in front of Celeste's grave. In her hands, she held my moonstone amulet. The amulet had the name Seraphina carved into its silver backing. I watched as she carefully rubbed toxic silver dust over my name, using a small pestle wrapped in thick cloth to protect her own skin, preparing to bury my sacred gift in the dirt. She wanted the dead to receive the blessing before the living. In my past life, I had stood in the shadows, paralyzed by the guilt she had brainwashed me with. I had let her bury my identity in the name of pack loyalty. Not this time. My inner wolf let out a furious roar that echoed in my mind. I stepped out of the shadows, my boots crunching loudly against the wet gravel. My mother jumped, dropping the lantern as she turned to face me. Before she could speak, I dropped to my knees in the mud. I plunged my hand into the mire. A shock of cold, like 1,000 needles, shot up my arm as my fingertips brushed the silver. The sting was a familiar agony, but I did not recoil. Instead, I closed my fingers around the links, slowly, deliberately, excavating the heavy chain along with a clod of stinking, leaf-choked mud. The silver dust burned my skin, sending sharp jolts of pain up my arm, but I did not flinch. I wiped the toxic mud off the stone using the edge of my cloak. "What in the goddess's name are you doing here?" my mother shrieked, her face pale and twisted with madness. I stood up slowly, dangling the amulet in front of her eyes. Taking back what is mine, I said, my voice a low counterpoint to the rumble of distant thunder. Her eyes widened in shock, and then her face flushed with pure rage. She raised her hand and slapped me hard across the cheek. "You selfish little bitch," she spat, her voice trembling. "You have no room in your heart for your poor sister. You don't deserve the favor of the moon goddess." I tasted the metallic tang of blood in my mouth. I slowly turned my head back to look at her, my expression completely blank. "I am wearing this amulet tomorrow," I stated, my words cutting through the rain like shards of ice. But as I turned to leave, she lunged, her fingers like claws, and snatched the amulet from my grasp. I could have held on. I chose not to. The amulet was a symbol, but her panic told me something far more valuable. She was already losing control. She stumbled backward, clutching it to her chest as if it were her own heart. "It belongs to Celeste," she screamed, before turning and scrambling away into the darkness, a hunched figure swallowed by the storm. I let her go. The battle for a piece of jewelry was a trifle. The war for my soul, however, was about to begin. The rain washed the blood from my lip, but it could not wash away the fire burning in my veins. Tomorrow, the entire pack would know that I was no longer a shadow. And somewhere beyond this storm, Alpha Dominic was already riding toward my family's castle, expecting to claim a bride named Celeste. He had no idea he was walking into a trap, or that I was the one who would spring it, Serafina POV. The following evening, the storm had passed, but the tension inside the castle had only grown thicker. The air was heavy with unspoken threats. The grand hall of our territory was decorated with heavy velvet curtains and glowing chandeliers. But the atmosphere felt completely wrong. At the front of the room, there were 2 wooden altars set up. One was decorated with fresh wildflowers for my coming-of-age ceremony. The other held a large oil painting of Celeste, surrounded by rows of burning white candles. It looked more like a funeral than a celebration of life. My mother stood near the stairs, barking orders at the servants. When she saw me walking down the steps, her eyes narrowed in disgust. She gestured to an omega maid holding a folded pile of fabric. "Take off that red dress," my mother ordered. "You're wearing the pale linen. And use the scent masker. Scent is everything to our kind. It tells others who we are, what rank we hold, and whether we are healthy. To mask my scent and wear the pale colors of mourning on the day of my presentation was the ultimate insult. In my past life, I had worn the white linen, and the other wolves had laughed at me, calling me a walking ghost. I looked at the maid and pointed a firm finger at the dark red dress draped over the banister. "Bring me the crimson gown," I commanded. My father, Lord Silas, stepped out from the shadows of the corridor. He was the beta of our pack, the second in command, and his authority was absolute in our household. "Do as your mother says, Seraphina," he warned, his voice thick with irritation. He did not care about my feelings. He only cared about maintaining a perfect image in front of the visiting guests. When I did not move, my father released his beta aura. It was a pressure meant to bring lesser wolves to their knees. An invisible weight, heavy as a tombstone, settled on my shoulders. A phantom pain shot through the knee he had broken in my past life, and the muscles in my calves quivered beneath my skirts. I drove a thumbnail into the soft flesh of my palm, the sharp, grounding sting the only thing that kept me from sinking to the floor. I ignored his command, reached out, and grabbed the red dress myself. I walked behind the folding screen and changed into the vibrant crimson fabric. When I stepped out, the bright color contrasted sharply with the gloomy candles, and my father's face turned purple with anger. But the guests were already arriving, and he could not cause a scene. The pack priest, an old man draped in gray robes, cleared his throat nervously. He stepped up to my altar and began chanting the ancient prayers to the moon goddess. This was the blessing meant to give me strength before my bones broke during the shift later this week. As the priest reached for the ceremonial bowl of blessed water, a hand shot out and stopped him. It was my mother. She held up my moonstone amulet, the one she'd snatched last night. It now reeked of toxic silver dust. They shared a soul in the womb. My mother announced loudly to the silent crowd, "A twin bond cannot be severed by death. The moon goddess demands we honor both daughters tonight. She must wear the amulet that honors both the living and the dead." She lunged forward, trying to force the silver-laced chain over my head. I took a quick step back and raised my hands to protect my neck. I turned my fierce gaze to the priest, making sure every guest in the room could hear me. "Since when does the moon goddess bless the living with the rusted chains of the dead?" I asked sharply. A collective gasp echoed through the grand hall. The priest looked terrified, his eyes darting between my furious mother and the whispering guests. His hand, hovering over the bowl, trembled for a moment. Then, with a decisive movement that ignored my mother entirely, he dipped his fingers into the blessed water and traced a cool symbol upon my forehead. "The blessing is complete," the priest announced, taking a step back. The ceremony was over, but the tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Later, in the quiet stone corridor, my older brother Julian backed me against the wall. He was a warrior, a fighter trained to protect the pack, but his heart was cold. "You embarrassed our parents over a piece of jewelry," Julian hissed. "You're destroying the pack's harmony. For what?" He crossed his arms, looking at me with deep disappointment. "You shouldn't hold a grudge against a dead girl." I looked at my brother, feeling nothing but pity for his blind loyalty. "Dead wolves don't hear complaints, Julian," I said softly. "Only the living ones do." I pushed past him, leaving him standing alone in the dark hallway. The real battle was not with my family. It was with the Alpha who was coming to claim a ghost. And he was arriving in 3 days, Seraphina POV. 3 days had passed since my ceremony. My body ached with the pre-shift fever, my dormant wolf clawing at my human bones, begging to be let out. This morning, a royal carriage pulled into our courtyard. It carried the envoy and the personal tailor of Alpha Dominic, the ruler of the Supreme Pack. An Alpha is the highest authority among our kind, and his word is law. The tailor was here to measure me for the mating ceremony dress. I stood perfectly still in the center of the drawing room as the tailor wrapped a measuring tape around my waist. The envoy, a tall man with a sharp nose, walked in circles around me. He leaned in close, taking a deep breath near my shoulder. He frowned slightly, his eyes cold and calculating. "Your scent is incredibly faint," the envoy muttered. He smiled a thin, calculating smile. "But pleasing enough, I suppose. The Alpha expects absolute perfection from his new bride." My stomach dropped as his words confirmed my darkest fears. The Alpha did not want me. He wanted the shadow of Celeste. I turned my head to look directly into the envoy's eyes. "Tell me," I said, my voice dangerously calm, "whose name is actually on that registry?" The envoy blinked, caught off guard by my direct question, and opened his mouth to reply. Before he could speak, the drawing room doors slammed open. My mother rushed in, a fake, bright smile plastered across her face. "The envoy is an honored guest, Serafina," she scolded loudly. "Stop bothering him with your nonsense." She grabbed my arm with surprising strength, her nails digging into my skin. "Come with me to your father's study," she demanded. She dragged me down the hall and shoved me into the dark, wood-paneled room where my father sat behind a large desk. On the center of the desk sat a thick parchment scroll. As soon as I walked in, my mother rushed to the desk and slammed her hands down on top of the scroll. She looked panicked, her chest heaving as she tried to cover the paper. I did not hesitate, my eyes fixed on the white of her knuckles where they pressed the scroll to the desk. I walked forward, laid my hand over hers, and began to pry her fingers back, one by one, with a slow, inexorable pressure until the heavy parchment slid free. The heavy paper unrolled, revealing the official mating registry. There, written in dark black ink, was the name Celeste, followed by her birth date. A cold wave of horror washed over me. Among our kind, there are two types of mates. A fated mate is a soulmate chosen by the moon goddess, a perfect match of body and soul. But a political bond is a forced contract. If the souls do not match, the marking, the bite on the neck that seals the bond, will cause a violent physical rejection. The ancient laws were clear. A false name on a mating contract was a spiritual fraud. The marking bite would recognize the deception and punish the flesh that bore the lie. I remembered the tearing pain from my past life, the feeling of my blood boiling as my body tried to fight off an incompatible soul. It had killed me slowly and painfully. The words on the page blurred. How could you do this? My mother lifted her chin, her eyes shining with manic justification. Celeste had a short, tragic life, she said smoothly. It's only right she gets to experience the glory of being a Luna through you. Consider it an act of sisterly love. I felt physically sick. My father stood up from his heavy leather chair, his face dark and imposing. The contract is signed, and the Alpha accepted the terms. My father said coldly, "Don't ruin our family's chance to rise in status over a damn name." He looked at me as if I were a piece of property he was trading for power. I rolled up the parchment and dropped it back onto his desk. "A damn name?" I asked, letting out a dry, bitter laugh. "When the Alpha sinks his teeth into my neck, who do you think is going to bear the agony of a rejected soul?" They both remained silent, refusing to look me in the eye. I turned toward the door, my hand resting on the brass handle. "It is a death sentence," I whispered into the quiet room. I walked out, leaving my father staring in shock at my chilling prophecy. The door closed behind me. For a long moment, Lord Silas did not move. His gaze drifted from the door to a small, dust-covered drawer in the corner of his desk. He did not open it. He had not opened it in years, but his hand, unbidden, curled into a loose fist on the desktop, then slowly released. Inside that drawer lay a faded ribbon, Celeste's, and a smooth river stone Serafina had found when she was 5, proudly presented to him on his birthday. He had patted her head absently and never picked it up. He remembered. He remembered 2 stones, 2 children, 2 small bodies breathing in tandem as he checked on them each night before retiring. Then only one. He did not open the drawer. He never did. In the corridor outside, Alera's footsteps faded. Silas closed his eyes and let the darkness swallow it all again. By morning, he would sit at the breakfast table as if nothing had happened, signing whatever needed to be signed. The political bond was a death sentence, and I was going to burn it to the ground. But first, I needed proof of my mother's full madness. and I knew exactly where to dig.